Assalamu alaikum. Today I am going to demonstrate the human brain. This is the model of the human brain, actually the half of the human brain. We better call it the hemisection here. Let's better put it, and we'll talk about the first. Let's see the development of the human brain. We all know that the human brain, our central nervous system, the brain and spinal cord, these are developing from the neural tube. You see the neural tube which is coming from the ectoderm, the neuroectoderm. This is the neural tube here. Can you remember? This is the ectoderm here, the neural tube and the notochord. So this neural tube, again, this neural tube, the upper part of the neural tube will be dilated, will form some ball-like structure. We call this the brain vesicles. So at first, when we are in our mother's womb or uterus, we had this nervous system, that is the a narrow tube which have some bulging ball-like vesicles, the brain vesicles. So let's see these three brain vesicles. So ultimately these brain vesicles will grow differently, differently. Some will grow more, and the largest part of the vesicle, if you add another one, this is the first vesicle. We call this the forebrain, or the progencephalon. So this is the forebrain. This is the half of the forebrain here, right? So the midbrain or the middle brain vesicle will grow less or least. This is the midbrain here. If you add another thing, this is like this. So this is the forebrain, this is the midbrain, and there will be another ball here, and this is known as the hindbrain or rhombencephalon. So developmentally, we have three parts: the progencephalon or forebrain, I am holding it like this, the midbrain or mesencephalon, and the rhombencephalon or hindbrain. So let's focus on the forebrain first. Forebrain, that does mean the cerebrum itself. This is the cerebral hemisphere. The whole thing is the cerebrum. So the cerebral hemisphere or cerebrum, let's call it cerebrum, and this cerebrum is known as is actually developing from the part of the progencephalon. We call this telencephalon. And another part, this part you see here, the thalamus, the hypothalamus, metathalamus, epithalamus, these thalamic structures, they are developing also from the progencephalon, but this part is known as the diencephalon. Again, forebrain or progencephalon has two parts. One is the telencephalon, that is telescope. Another one is the diencephalon or Princess Diana. You see, let's talk about the telencephalon first, or cerebrum. Here is the cerebral hemisphere. So let's see the surfaces, borders, and the lobes first. So you see, if I hold this is anatomical position, this will be definitely this one is the medial surface, this one is the superolateral surface, and the below surface is the inferior surface. So we have three surfaces here. The inferior surface, can you see this inferior surface here? I am showing you. This is the inferior surface, and then again something is here. Then there is the inferior surface here on the posterior side. So actually inferior surface is divided by something that is, we call this the brainstem. The brainstem into two parts, the orbital part and the tentorial part. So we have these two parts of the inferior surface. So medial surface, superolateral surface, inferior surface, which is divided by the brainstem into two parts. This is the orbital part, or orbit will be there, and this is the tentorial part. The borders are superomedial border here. I am tracing with my finger. This one is the superomedial border, right? So this one I am showing here, here, this is the lateral border, and this one is the inferomedial border. So inferolateral border, inferomedial border, and superomedial border. So 3 borders are here. How many lobes are there? We can see here. I am holding this. This one is the frontal lobe here. Okay, fine. We have the parietal lobe here. We have the occipital lobe here, and we have the temporal lobe here. So how can we differentiate these lobes anatomically? Let's see. We have a sulcus here, right? So this sulcus almost in the middle, but slightly behind to the midpoint. This is known as the central sulcus. All we know, the main 2 sulci that can be traced. One is this central sulcus, and another one is the lateral sulcus. Lateral sulcus is actually coming from here, from the inferior surface almost. The particular point is the anterior perforated substance. So this is the lateral sulcus. I am putting my finger and pressing my finger, and this is the lateral sulcus. The lateral sulcus will go over the superlateral surface, and ultimately this lateral sulcus will have 3 branches, like the anterior branch, like the ascending branch, and the posterior branch or posterior rami. So this is the lateral sulcus here, and this is the central sulcus here. Let us trace another sulcus, which is very important to demarcate these lobes. So here you will better see it on the medial surface. This is the parieto-occipital sulcus, because this is the parietal lobe, this is the occipital lobe. So this sulcus is known as the parieto-occipital sulcus. This parieto-occipital sulcus will be traced also into this. On the medial surface there is the parieto-occipital sulcus. If you follow the parieto-occipital sulcus, you will find it in the superolateral surface also. So these 3 sulci, first trace these 3 sulci. One is the parieto-occipital, one is the central sulcus, and one is the lateral sulcus. And it will be easy for you to identify or differentiate between the different lobes. Another point you have to trace just in front of the occipital pole. There are 3 poles are here, right? So one is the frontal pole, one is the temporal pole, and one is the occipital pole. So in front of the occipital pole, if you trace this along the inferolateral border, you will find a notch here just in front of the occipital pole. So we call this the preoccipital notch here. So preoccipital notch, and there is the parieto-occipital sulcus. Let's first join these 2 points. Okay, parieto-occipital sulcus and preoccipital notch. We join this. If you join this imaginary plane, if you draw an imaginary plane, you will find a lobe here, right? So this is the occipital lobe. Okay, we have got one lobe, at least one lobe. So occipital lobe. Now this is the lateral sulcus, right, on the superolateral surface. So it is lateral sulcus, and if you join an imaginary plane from the lateral sulcus up to this line, that is the joining line up between the parieto-occipital sulcus and preoccipital notch. I am putting my finger here, and I am putting also a finger along this. You see the imaginary line. So I am finding here another lobe here, right? So below, this is the temporal lobe. So temporal lobe, this is the boundary of the temporal lobe. Behind there will be the imaginary plane, and above there will be the lateral sulcus and the imaginary plane joining this with this. So if I put my finger here, there will be the central sulcus, there will be the imaginary plane, there will be the border here, right, superomedial border, and the line joining the this lateral sulcus to the main line, preoccipital notch to parieto-occipital border. So I am putting my finger again, this one, and if I can put my finger over right here. So this is the notch here, this is the lobe here, we call this the parietal lobe. So let's see the boundary of the parietal lobe. Sir, this is the parietal lobe here. Sir, above there is the superomedial border. Sir, in front there is the central sulcus. Very good. And then posterior ramus of the posterior branch of the lateral sulcus, and an imaginary line going backward, and then behind there will be a line joining the parieto-occipital sulcus to the pre-occipital notch. So these are the lobes over here, right? So let's see something on the medial surface, which is very important. The medial surface, it has no charm, it has no no structure we can ask you in the exam, but medial surface is important here. So you can see what are the structures we can see on the medial surface. From here you see this is the brain stem, right? So the midbrain, the pons and medulla, this stem, it is known as the brain stem. And don't forget, but this is the rhombencephalon, the pons, medulla and the cerebellum, this forming the rhombencephalon or hindbrain. The students used to make this mistake to separate between the hindbrain and the brainstem. The midbrain is not included into this hindbrain because midbrain itself is midbrain. So midbrain, pons and medulla, it is forming the brain stem. Okay, let's go behind the brain stem here. Between the brain stem and the medulla, you can see something, a space here. This is the lateral, this is the fourth ventricle here, right? So fourth ventricle, if you go to fourth ventricle and trace upward, you will enter into the within the midbrain. So midbrain, this is the part midbrain here, the anterior part, and this is the posterior part. Actually light is reflecting here. So posterior part, in between a canal or duct is going up. So this is the duct, we call this the cerebral aqueduct. So this is the cerebral aqueduct, and if you follow the cerebral aqueduct, you will find the just onto the lateral side you will find the third ventricle. On here also there is the third ventricle, right, on this hemisphere. So in between the third ventricle there will be another third ventricle, not third ventricle, thalamus, sorry, thalamus and thalamus. In between these two thalami there will be the another ventricle. So fourth ventricle, cerebral aqueduct, then there will be the third ventricle, right? So third ventricle, and this third ventricle will communicate with the ventricle within it. You see, this one is actually confluent or not solid because there is space there. This space, looks like this, It is called the lateral ventricle. So one lateral ventricle this side, another lateral ventricle this side. These two will communicate through the interventricular foramen with the third ventricle between the thalami, right? There is the thalami, and then through the cerebral aqueduct, it will communicate with the fourth ventricle here. So fourth ventricle, this is the cerebral aqueduct. There will be the third ventricle, and then interventricular foramina with the lateral ventricle. The lateral ventricle looks like this. If you cut this one, you will find the lateral ventricle like this. So you will find an anterior horn there, you will find a posterior horn here, and you will find an inferior horn here. So posterior horn actually going to the occipital lobe, the anterior horn is going to the frontal lobe, and the inferior horn is going to the temporal lobe. That's the basic thing here. So these are the things you will trace within here, and if you go above it, will say this is this very familiar thing. This is the largest fiber that is communicating between the two cerebral hemisphere. We call this the commissural fiber, the largest commissural fiber. This is corpus callosum, right? So you see this dilated part is the splenium, then the same part, this is the body or trunk, and then you see the bent-like structure, bent-like part. We call this the genu. Genu means bent, and this thin part here, right? So in the anteriorly, so this is the rostrum. So rostrum, genu, body, and splenium. So these are the parts of the corpus callosum. You will find also some other commissural fiber, anterior commissure, posterior commissure. So thank you very much. I hope you will stay safe, and let's pray for each other. Thank you.